So let's get started. We are on time. We're going to honor the time because everyone's time is valuable. So, hi all, hi everybody. My name is Chef Liesha, Chef Liesha Barnett, and I run the Food for the Culture class here for BYLP. I am a personal chef. I have been a chef since 1996. That's when I graduated from culinary school. And so I have worked in a number of areas in the restaurant world. I cooked for a sorority house. I have cooked for celebrities, done production cooking, so many different things in the cooking world, catering, and all of that good stuff. And so I have a degree in nutrition and a focus on social justice. And over the years, what I recognized was an understanding that I got to go to work and make beautiful dishes with great ingredients for everyone else, but I couldn't go home and do the same thing with what I found in my neighborhood grocery store. And that bothered me. It bothered me to know that when I went to work, I was servicing all of these clientele. They were eating wonderful food. They were so happy. And that the people in my very own neighborhood, backyard, my family members, everybody else, they did not have the same access. And the only reason why I had access was because I worked for other folks. And it got me to thinking and doing more research and studying and going back to school to learn all about how food affects our people and what food justice really means. So, in my own words, in my perspective, food justice is part of social justice because without food, we don't live. Everybody has to eat in some sort of way, shape, form, or fashion. If you are not eating by putting food in your mouth and chewing, then you are receiving nutrition intravenously or some other methods as well. So, food, nutrition, all of that is just a cornerstone to exist, right? Well, what happens when you are systemically put in a situation where you don't have access to the foods that will sustain you? What happens then? So, what ends up happening is that your people have high health disparities. And what that means is that your family members, right? They will have heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, other diseases that they say run in your family. They'll tell you that your grandmother had this, so you're going to have it. If your great grandparents had this, you're going to get it. If you are experiencing something, it is legitimately simply because that is what your family experienced. My work and what we do at BYLP and what we do in other groups in other areas is to show you and to teach you that that's incorrect. The real reason why there are certain disparities are because they were systemically created. And your family members ended up having health issues, not because they didn't care about their health, not because they didn't make great choices, not because of any of those things. It is legitimately because they were systemically kept from the tools and the resources that they need to ensure that they remain healthy and their families did as well. So, in the world of social justice, food justice is understanding what food apartheid is, what food sovereignty is, and what we can do to help change the narrative for those things. Food apartheid, saying that instead of calling it a food desert where you live is a food desert, if we say we are victims of food apartheid, we are actually holding all of the powers that be accountable for the work that they did in ensuring that our people lived in neighborhoods without grocery stores that had a wide variety of nutritious foods for us to consume and purchase. And that happened because of redlining. That happened when city planners said, we don't want a grocery store in that neighborhood. Let's put a couple of liquor stores there and give them what they need in corner markets, and they'll be fine. Let's not give them parks with actual grass. All they need is a basketball hoop and a play structure, and they'll be fine. No trees, no grass. Let us put them in a place where public transit is the only way to get around. They'll be fine. What we have since learned is the emissions from public transit, the lack of green space, as well as the inaccessible nature of fresh foods that are nutritious and sound in for your mind, body, and spirit, all were not present. And this is the reason why we call it food apartheid and not food deserts. Deserts are naturally occurring things. You know, you have deserts, you have rainforests, you have the plains, the flatlands, all of those things. Food apartheid is a system. So instead of calling where you live a food desert because you don't have a grocery store, you're dealing with food insecurity because of food apartheid. The system that was put in place to ensure that we're not going to make sure we take care of you. And that is what we have been dealing with for generations. And it is at this point in time where we said at BYLP, it is important that we understand what this means for our future generations as well as current ones, what we are dealing with right now. How do we heal our bodies right now from what we're dealing with? How do we learn to grow and nurture ourselves moving forward? And how do we encourage young people in particular who are looking for certain pathways and careers to see that there is work to be done in policy with agriculture, food, culinary arts, nutrition, health, and wellness. And this could be your space. This could be the actual space that you fit in. If you have ever thought about certain things and you've wondered, and you enjoy science, you enjoy being in the kitchen, all of these things, we need you. We absolutely wholeheartedly need you. And we need you to understand that this journey is not linear because, again, I started out as somebody who was just a short order cook who just enjoyed playing around in the kitchen to now in policy, advocacy, education, and all those other areas on top of, because the career has layered itself, right? And knowing that as a people, we have always had the knowledge, the skills, and the tools and everything. We came here with it. We existed with it. It is within our DNA. We are born with it. Our DNA is not the DNA that carries disease simply because we are Black. And that is what those in the medical professional world would have you to believe. And that is what a lot of other people in the health and wellness industry would have you to believe, to accept the fact that if mom or grandma or uncle, cousin had a particular disease, that it just means that that's because we're Black and we're more susceptible to it. We have taken this news and this diagnosis and absorbed it into our psyche, where now we're saying, let's not do that. I reject that. I reject it because I have seen for myself how many people were healed through the empowerment of learning how to cook for themselves, learning what food combinations work best for them, not following a diet. I'm a firm believer in anti-diet. A lot of diets will have you lose weight in the short term. Long-term results is something different. And how one goes about really restricting yourself for long periods of time, what does that look like when you go through these periods where you're going to restrict yourself and you're going to say, I'm going hardcore? Yeah, you might drop some pounds, but when you don't understand the science behind the need for knowing and understanding that there's a place for all foods, that there's a balance system, that you need to, you really miss crucial things like, once you study anatomy, physiology, and nutrition, you know that your brain cells feed off of carbohydrates. So when you learn this, and then you hear somebody say, I'm on a low carb or no carb diet, yeah, starve your brain, have fun with that. Like, it's legitimately science that says carbohydrates are what the cells in your brain feed on. So we need to understand a more comprehensive approach, not reject our cultural foods. I am a huge, huge advocate for eating what you grew up eating, just learning and understanding different ways and maybe reducing fat, salt, and sodium, but increasing flavor. So we can do that. We can do that on a regular basis. And then Thanksgiving is when you do it grandma's way, you know? Christmas is when you do it grandma's way. But the rest of the year, I'm gonna eat my collard greens. I'm gonna eat my greens. I'm just not going to do it the same way I would do it for a holiday, but it's still going to be enjoyable. It's still going to be delicious and wholesome and tasty, and I don't have to give up who I am. And that's really important that you know that you don't have to give up who you are in order to have this pursuit for health and wellness. What does food justice look like in today's world in as far as work? I can tell you my work is varied. If you are interested in food justice, in social justice, in advocacy, in food, then you might be someone who teaches people how to cook. That's one of the things that I do. Organizing a community supported agriculture system is another thing. That's also known as a CSA. And the CSA program is simply, you come and you pick up bags of fresh fruits and vegetables. We have a free one here in Stockton for the community. There are lots of free ones. There are others where you pay, but the idea and the mindset is to create this regenerative, sustainable model where you are supporting local farmers who are growing the food that you want to eat. And then you purchase directly from them instead of going to the grocery store. In turn, you reduce your carbon footprint, you support the local economy, and you support your health and wellness as well by buying from someone who probably picked those items straight from the soil that very morning or the day before so that you have it in your hands. So being a food justice advocate is someone who is probably a lobbyist who is going to ensure that local and state laws are geared towards sustaining small farmers, minority farmers, and chefs and cooks and other professionals so that this type of relationship can continue to happen. So that more people who want to grow food are interested can actually do the same thing, that they feel supported, that they can do that as well. If you want to be a chef and a food advocate, you can do that as well. If you just love cooking and you want to be on that line, you want to own your own restaurant, you want to get a food truck, a pop up, you can still affect change in your community by doing that. And the way that you do that as well is a system in a way that I call Robin Hooding, where you go ahead and you set your price at what it is, you sell your items in whatever neighborhood you want to, but you give back to your community in a very distinct way. And you spend time in your community giving back to them at either a reduced rate or volunteer or donate for the cause, for the people. Always go back to where you came from to help those. It's the Sankofa mindset where you got to go back and bring them with you. So as you elevate and you do what you do and you grow and you learn and you get a few more dollars, a little more popular, all of those things, and you go back and grab a few people and bring them forward with you so that they have what you have learned. So they have the opportunity. That is advocacy. That is justice on another level. Speaking out about the things that you see on social media is another way. I know a lot of you here are on social media. Consider using your platforms for highlighting certain things at certain times and saying, let's make it make sense. Did you know that food insecurity means that people who are food insecure really do not get the opportunity to decide what they want to eat? What do I mean by that? There are people right now who don't know what their next meal is going to be, not because they haven't taken anything out of the freezer or they haven't gone to the store. It is because they're on their way to either a free food pickup, a food bank, or some other kind of support system where they're going to be given a bunch of items. And with those items, they're going to have to figure out how to create the best possible meal for themselves and their families. Now, if that doesn't sound like a Food Network cooking show, I don't know what does. But if you can imagine, that's something that I grew up with. I grew up with that in Oakland. What do we have to eat today? I don't know. Let's go in the cabinet and look. Let's go see. I grew up with parents and family members who stood in free food lines, used food stamps, all of those things. And I thought that was the normal life for everybody because nobody was ashamed of it. It was just a thing. We're going to the pantry today. Let's go get some bread and cereal and stuff. And, I didn't realize how much pride and ego that my parents had to let go of in order to do that so that there was food on the table for the six of us. Today, a lot of people have too much pride and ego that would allow themselves to go into a space to pick up food so that their family can eat. Which brings me to another point. If you're interested in advocacy and food justice and this kind of work, start a food bank, open a food bank, work at a food bank. Food banks are cornerstones of support for many communities, but their hands are often tied because they're nonprofit organizations that have to fill out paperwork for grant funds and things like that to continue to operate. And a lot of times, it's not always the type of food you would want to receive or give away, and all of those things are difficult to navigate through. But the number one thing that you could do as a person or persons or organization that is giving food to people is to not ask them for anything in return. That's the number one thing. The number one thing is to maintain the dignity of the individuals who are coming to you for sustenance. Because I don't know if you've ever been hungry, like, hangry, where you're just like, oh gosh, I'm so hungry. I waited all day to eat. Now I got to get in here and figure out what's about to happen. I'm going to make this meal. I'm going to do this thing. And you have choices. Imagine being hangry and showing up somewhere where someone is giving you food. And there is this list of things that you must do to prove that you're worthy of said food. You have to prove your income, the number of people in your household, establish a need by showing a bill. Some people, even in the faith-based community, require you to sit down and listen to them talk about their belief system before giving you the free food. As someone who has been on the receiving and the giving end, the number one thing you could do as a person who honors and respects human nature, people, and knowing the need to support nutritionally is to not ask a person for anything in return. If it is indeed, in fact, free, don't ask for anything, just give. That's a real big thing, because what tends to happen is in those spaces where you do require all of these other steps to happen in order to get the food, people won't come and get the food even if they're hungry, because they don't want to tell their life story. They don't want to have to prove things that they need anything. They don't want to be dehumanized. So that's one thing that you want to remember, that there's a human behind those eyes, behind that need. There are people who you have to eat to live. So we can't avoid it, right? Food justice is also understanding that as you grow up and you leave home and you are now on your own, what's next? What do I do next? I have no idea. I learned 3 things to cook before I left home, and now I'm away from my parents and I have no idea what else to do. Well, first of all, you should be attending the Food for the Culture class every month with BYLP so you can learn more than 3 dishes, but also, it's important because too many people leave. Too many people go off on their own and they are not given the tools. So we hope that you're here, that you are interested, that you will ask the questions, and that you can receive the tools that you really need to move forward. Because I'd love to teach people how to shop on a budget, how to make things with 5 ingredients or less. And even if you don't have a lot of like a full kitchen to work with or anything like that. I have the cutthroat kitchen thing is real when you're cooking on a little camping stove and having to figure out how to make a meal for everyone. So there are a lot of elements to when I think of food justice, when I think of social justice and food insecurity and food apartheid, what that looks like and how it is that we in this space can make a difference. How can I make a difference? And then in turn, what ends up happening for you when you return the favor to someone else? So I am going to actually open the floor right now for any questions, comments, because I don't like to just talk to myself for a long time. But if anybody has questions about what it's like to be a chef, the process of me getting my nutrition degree, certifications, things like that, working in the industry, what do I know about culturally appropriate foods? And anything in between, now's your chance. You can like take the mic off and, signal to me and wave, hey, Chef Liesha, and we can get some questions going for the rest of the time because I want to hear your feedback. Okay, Elijah, go ahead.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, it's it's extremely disrespectful to have to ask someone who's in desperate need of food to tell to ask something of them when they are in desperate need or in deep necessity of food or in just any any one of the three or four necessities of life. If they're in need of a shelter, if they're in need of food, if they're in need of water, they need a space to feel comfortable. It's extremely disrespectful to have to ask them for something in return when they come to you and you promise them something that they need and you label it as free. It's it's incredibly disrespectful to the person. It's dehumanizing, like you said. It's also a waste of their time. If you promise them something and you essentially lie to them, you you're gonna lose customers, and that will spread. That's gonna spread throughout the community. No one's gonna want to come to someone who has to. They have to prove that they need food. If they're coming to you, they need food. They say, "Hey, I'm hungry. I need food." Why do they have to prove it? They just told you. Why would I lie about food? I'm hungry. I need food.
Yeah. And
That's all I have to say.
there's a really good answer for that because and this is why I mentioned to everyone here that if cooking isn't your thing, if being a chef is not your thing, but you are interested in the political world, this is where you come into play in civil service and nonprofit work. Because Elijah, a lot of times the reason why they do that is because when you are a nonprofit organization and you are receiving grant funding in order to operate your food bank, your program, they want you to collect data. The powers that be, the folks who sign at the dotted line for your checks, they want you to collect data because that's their research. A lot of times, if you're doing this work, it is specifically to meet a certain need, right? So they want you to be able to prove that you have made a particular impact. And so they have you do these surveys and questionnaires and all these types of things that tend to be invasive, right? Well, without it, they would cut some of the grant funding, right? You don't get what you say you're going to get, and the programs could be lost. A lot of times when they are asking these questions, they're not doing so with the malicious intent to dehumanize, but it happens. So that's why when I brought that up to this group in particular, those of you who are heading into the phase of your life where you're thinking about careers and you're thinking about what it is that you want to do, keep this in mind that if you're going to give food away in particular, remember the dignity of the person, remember the humanity of the person, and you could be that change that you want to see in that space. I filled out Okay, I have a question in the thing, and I'll answer that next. I found out through working with a nonprofit organization that while all of the programs that I've built and put together and do on a daily basis are fun and beautiful, that we have to go back and fill out paperwork and do reports for what the impact was, right? And I had to stand my ground on a couple of those questions and said, I'm not asking these people these questions. Just not going to do it. You're not going to get that information from me, period. And that's the line in the sand that I have drawn. Now, mind you, I've been in my career for over 20 years, so I have the leverage to be able to do that. So that is something that comes with time, but I just want that to be on your mind to think about, because you're right, Elijah, it is dehumanizing. Sam, I see your hand. I'm going to answer the question in the chat first and then come back to you, okay? All right, the question is, how many years did it take for me to become a chef? So I went to culinary school. Culinary school was less than 1 year. And it was very difficult, very grueling, because it was military culinary school. I joined the Navy when I was 17. And when I was 18 years old, I had graduated from basic training and went right to culinary school from basic training. And it was a short program, very intensive. There was probably 2 or 3 tests every single week. And there was a lot of technique to learn. It was hard work. But getting comfortable in the kitchen, getting comfortable in your work, in your space takes many years. So again, I graduated from culinary school in 1996, and y'all know what this year is. So pretty soon, I bet someone's gonna guess how old I am, because my birthday is in a couple of weeks. So I'll give you some time to think on that. Sam, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
When did you realize you wanted to be a chef?
That's an excellent question, Sam. Okay, so I have been cooking since I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I used to watch some old PBS shows about cooking, the cooking shows before cable and Food Network and all that kind of stuff. I did not know I wanted to be a chef at that time. But I did consistently stay in the kitchen from the age of 9 until I graduated high school, when I went into the Navy. I wanted to be a doctor when I was a kid, a surgeon specifically. And when I got to my senior year in high school, I had like this major meltdown because I had a horrible SAT score. Even though my GPA was 4.0, I was student body president of my class. I held other positions. I played varsity sports. I was like the all-around kid who should have been able to go to college. I freaked out with a very low SAT score because I had test anxiety, refused to take it again. And I saw a recruiter at my school one day, and he asked me, "What are you doing after graduation?" And I was like, "My life is over. My SAT score was horrible. I don't know what I'm going to do." He was like, "Join the Navy." My parents freaked out because I was 17 years old, and they were like, "There's no way. You're going to join the military, have a whole military family and everything." And, but no women in my family had joined the military until I did. And even to this day, still none of my cousins that are women have joined. But I really didn't know that the chef life long-term was for me until after I got out of the military and I tried to do other types of work, and I kept wanting to go back to the kitchen. So I got out of the Navy, and then I worked in a bank, I worked at a gym. I started to take classes for software development. All of that was super boring. I felt like I was dying inside, and then I went back to cooking. So I would say when I knew for sure that being a chef was for me, it was at that point where I had literally tried to avoid being a chef, and I kept wanting to go back. Zarian and Kaden, I hope I said that right. I am not wearing my glasses.
Yes. And what is it like to be My name's Ariane. What is it like to be a chef?
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. What is it like? You're always hot because you're on your feet a lot of hours, and it's very hot in the kitchen. And chefs work all holidays. So I want to give you a word of caution. Like when everybody is like, oh, it's the 4th of July, you're going to the cookout. No, chefs are either cooking for someone else's cookout or actually in a restaurant making cookout food at a restaurant. Like whenever the rest of the world is off of work is when chefs work the hardest, because there are no breaks. That is one thing that is hard for some people to adjust to, but no 2 days are the same, which is really good for people who don't like repetition, because while you might make the same type of foods repetitively, the way your day flows, every day is different. Every day is unpredictable, particularly when you are a personal chef versus a restaurant chef. So those are some differences, but it's a lot of work. You're on your feet a lot. You got to have good shoes.
What type of cuisine do you specialize in? Do you have a special, like a specialty, whether it's soul food, Caribbean? Do you have some sort of specialty?
My specialty is actually eclectic because of my travels and my training and experience with not just the military, but also family and friends who enjoy cooking. I do a fusion of a lot of different types of things. I would say that my main specialty is cultural foods all across the board, particularly African diasporic foods. So anything that has, like, you could say soul food, American soul food, as well as elements of Caribbean foods, Latin foods, all across the diaspora, melding in different flavors, textures, and really as much from the garden as possible. So that's really my guide most of the time. Earlier today, I made a dish that I've never made before. I just had, let me go out into the garden and see what I got. So I grabbed some tomatoes, jalapeno, what else did I have back there? A zucchini, brought that in, and I had crab in the fridge and some sweet potatoes. And so I said, okay, well, I'm in a curry mood. So I made some type of curry. It's not like a real authentic curry dish, but curry was, the spices were used in it. So I definitely fuse all the different things that are, like, I have this thing in the back of my head where it's like the matrix of flavors and foods. I just mix them all in and do what I want. And that's really it. I don't like to stick to one way of doing things. Oh, yes, Sam, go ahead.
What are the parameters in opening a nonprofit business?
Whew. Well, that's a long one. I don't think we have the 45 hours it is going to take to dismantle that one. But nonprofit organizations require a lot of planning and just, an understanding of what your end game is, right? What is it that you are specifically trying to do with your organization? Coming up with a mission statement, coming up with a plan, and then establishing who is your team? Who are your board members? Because nonprofits have boards, you have to have some board members, people who you can count on, who will help you make decisions, who understand the vision. They tend to take some time to put together. If they don't take time to put together, I don't know how long it's going to last if there's not a lot of thought put into and planning into it. But it requires a lot of paperwork, a lot of government paperwork. But really, really, really the biggest thing about establishing a nonprofit is your heart and understanding what the work is so that you won't want to quit when it gets tough, because it's going to get tough.
Quick question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
what made you want to get your degree in nutrition?
Okay. That's a good question. Thank you, Brianna. Okay, so when I went to school for nutrition, it was because I was not feeling too great, you guys. I was much heavier than I am now. I was having some health issues that I felt like I should not have had I was in my 30s and I thought, well, I need to learn how to take care of myself, right? It was really purely self-motivated to begin with. Like going into it, I definitely was like, I'm not getting a true understanding from personal trainers, from the dietitians that I saw, or anybody else, what it is that I am not doing, should I do to really get my health to a place to where I want it to be. Because I knew that cooking was going to be a part of my life long term. But I also knew that the more hours I stayed on my feet, the more I tried to do this work, the sicker I just felt. And when I say sick, I just felt tired all the time, like extremely sleepy, like always tired. Like I could never sleep enough. But as someone who doesn't like to sleep a lot, I was like, well, I have stuff to do, so I can't like, it's 5 hours tonight, things like that. And I went to school in my very first 2 semesters is when I learned that what I was learning was not only going to heal myself, but it was going to benefit my community. So, and I can't tell you what that aha moment was, but I knew that if I knew how to cook the food, then learning how the food works in the body, how it would benefit me health-wise, then I could combine those two things and do that for other people. And I thought of my parents, first of all, because they were dealing with health issues. So I said, if I learn this for me, then I can pass it down to somebody else. Go ahead, Zachariah.
It's kind of off topic, but like, what was your favorite dish to like cook in your career?
My favorite dish. When I was in Italy, I was stationed in Italy for 2 years. Our ship went to Spain. We did a cruise to Spain and we went to like 3 different parts of Spain. There was a dish in Spain called paella that I absolutely fell in love with. It was my very favorite thing. And it's interesting because there's a dish in Italy that is similar to it, but it's the Italian version. At the time, I didn't realize how powerful those 2 dishes were until later. But learning how to make the seafood rice dish and the paella in Spain, later coming back to understand that was their version of jambalaya. Food is universal. That is what I learned in cooking, that food is so universal that almost every dish in some region has a comparable dish in another region. It's their version. So paella, the seafood rice, the jambalaya, those are all very similar things. So I would say that the learning how to make paella was the highlight because it's very complex and it's a beautiful dish.
As a Black woman, what was the most, as a Black person in general though, what was the most challenging part, or were there any challenges through your journey to become who you are today? And if so, what, if you're open to sharing?
Yes, several challenges. The first thing is that there are not a lot of Black people in general in many of these kitchens that don't serve soul food. So in spaces that are not exclusively focused on Black food, you tend not to see us. So I have worked in spaces where there was an Italian restaurant, a steakhouse, a bistro. They don't think I knew how to cook anything other than Black food. So the assumption that I didn't know how to properly cook a steak or a pasta dish or something that's just super simple was always insinuated. And especially, and here's the interesting part too, the majority of the people in the kitchen were Mexican men. Those were the folks I worked with. So it didn't matter what type of restaurant it was, the majority of the folks in the kitchen that I worked with behind the line, not like a custodian or a runner or something like that, they were Mexican men. So I was often looked at as the outsider in those spaces. I was also looked at as the outsider in terms of whenever I decided to start a family. I have 2 children. When I got pregnant both times, I became a liability to the restaurant, to the establishment. And I'd have to take time off because I was growing a whole human. And then when I returned to work, my job was gone. And they weren't even considering allowing me back because in the culinary world, unless you are working for one of these corporate establishments, like these really big name brand hotels, restaurants, things like that, there's no HR team, there's no benefits or any of that. Like you're just an hourly employee. They will give your job away. And then when you return, they will question your ability to do your work because you are a parent. And can I focus when I am at work and not have to leave if there's an emergency with my child? I flat out had a woman tell me, you are qualified for the executive chef position, but I'm not giving it to you because you have small children. Not, knowing that my husband had the job with the benefits. He was the one who would take time off when the kids needed something because I would lose pay, but he had flex time and PTO and things like that, that we were, had that team arrangement. She never even asked. So there were challenges with that, having to start at the beginning every single time. Having to prove my worth as a woman who is Black and not very thin, having a culinary degree, a nutrition degree, serve safe management, certification in lots of other different areas, and a focus on food security, body positivity, health at every size. I have challenges every single time I show up, and every single time I have to tell them, this is my experience, this is who I am, this is my background. I have to run the resume down. It gets to be irritating and annoying, but it also has become so much part of the introduction when I am meeting people that they understand now from the beginning. Whereas before, one of my friends, she used to say, just tell them who you are at the beginning. And I was like, oh, that is so irritating. Like, why do I have to do that? So she said, watch their body language change when you tell them, and you will see. So we did an experiment. We went to a mixer. This was pre-COVID, and we went to an event, and she introduced me as a Navy veteran chef and, all of the things. She ran my resume down in 30 seconds to every person, and literally every single person, before she gets the whole thing out, like if she'll say, hey, this is Liesha, so-and-so, it's nice to meet you. And then she does the intro, their posture changed. All of a sudden, it's so wonderful to meet you. Oh, the work that you're doing is so amazing. The response that I got back is so different. And that is a cautionary tale in, like, I show up as me. Now I have red hair. Sometimes it's blue. Sometimes it's purple. Sometimes the earrings are bigger. Sometimes, so they underestimate the individual. And then when you send them your resume, then they go, oh, okay, well, she's someone I have to pay attention to now. So that has been a consistent theme in this space going forward. It started out that way, and it will probably end that way. And I've gotten to a place where I'm comfortable now with, leading with that, but it's something that I never thought that I would have to make practice. So that is something when I'm, mentoring other chefs coming up in the business and other people in general, let them know who you are when you first show up, because it's irritating. It is. We shouldn't have to. We should be respected as human beings. We really absolutely should. But we're not. And this is the space. This is literally what I've had to do to where, oh, they adjust themselves. Oh, well, tell me about your travels. Like all of a sudden, I'm a worthy individual to know because I've been around the world. It's just the way it is. It's weird, but there we have it.
Where did you travel when you were in the Navy? Where did you go?
Oh, I went a lot of places. So my first duty station after basic was San Diego. I was there for culinary school. And then after that, I went to Italy. I was stationed in Sardinia, Italy. That's at the bottom of the boot, little island. While I was in Sardinia, I saw Rome, Florence, Milan, Venice, Olbia, like a bunch of places you probably never even heard of in Italy, small towns, as well as the big cities, the Colosseum, all the stuff that they show in the movies. I saw that. I've been, Greece, to Kalamata, Greece. Beautiful, beautiful place. I have seen the Rock of Gibraltar at sea, Morocco, Spain. In Spain, I went to Palma, Almeria, and Rota. Then when I came back to the West Coast, stateside, went back to San Diego. And while in San Diego, we cruised around Mexico and came up the Pacific, and we went to Hawaii. And then I switched duty stations to Japan. So I was stationed in Yokosuka, which is about 45 minutes away from Tokyo. It's a large city outside of Tokyo. I was there for a year and a half, I think it was, something like that, and got to see different parts of Japan. Beautiful, beautiful. Japan was amazing. Before coming back to California after getting out of the Navy.
Was it fun and cool being in the Navy?
That's relative. So here's my thing. The military was great for me at the time. That was a wonderful option. In 2021, I am never advocating for any Black people to join the military in any capacity. I will support you if you decide to do so, but I'm never going to suggest it unless you have some very interesting circumstances where that is the best for you. For me, I learned a lot. I got to travel. I learned a trade, a skill that I have for the rest of my life that I will always be grateful for. But I was also injured while I was active duty. I had some issues with sexism, with racism, with all of the isms while I was active duty. And it was not always fun. It was very, very hard work. When you think about now, right? Anybody that you know, unless they're like in medicine, like they're surgical nurses, doctors, that sort of thing, right? Most people don't work 16 hours a day, but I did when I was active duty. And I don't like that. I don't want to work that many hours in one day ever again in life. So it was like a lot of hours, a lot of days of working. The fun of being in other places, wonderful, beautiful, yes. Would I change my experience, my time? No. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But yeah, it's a bittersweet thing. It really is, because the injuries that I sustained when I was active duty are still with me. And I wasn't even active as long as like some of my friends. So there are challenges in having physical limitations to what you can do when your work is physical. So that was another issue that I ran into as a woman in the industry is chefs don't take breaks. And if they do, they're getting side-eyed by everybody else. So changing the culture of what it looks like to be a chef is really what I am on the cusp of doing, because like there are a bunch of us who are saying it's not even that serious, it's just food. So we're really trying to change the mindset that we have to be these people who work these incredibly long hours, who never take breaks, who never make time for ourselves, who are required to work on every God-given holiday on the calendar. And it's So there's a lot, and I think that's with any profession. You have your good stuff, you have your bad stuff, but when it's in you, sometimes it doesn't feel like work. Like I love what I do so much that a lot of times it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like this is my day, this is my life.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for being here. I hope that this session provided you with some insights, that your questions were answered, and all that good stuff. I had a really great time talking with you all. And I want you to stay in touch with BYLP so that you know when the next Food for the Culture class is coming, so that I will see all your lovely faces there so that you can, also learn how to cook some things. And we talk more in detail about just how what we do will impact you later regarding food justice, food security. And if you have any questions, and if you're local and need some volunteer hours, my day job, Edible Schoolyard Project, we are putting together a volunteer program shortly, and will be really great to get to see your faces in person when the time is right to get on the farm and do some wonderful things.